Hello. So just a few quick facts about Tokenize to give you some history. So founded in 2019, we started actually on BCH and followed the fork to BSV. So we've always had at the beginning, and since the very early days, a vision of building on a big block Bitcoin. So we believe in the original vision for Bitcoin as Satoshi Nakamoto envisioned it. We're headquartered in Australia, but we're serving a global customer base. 9 team members spread across the world, US, UK, Australia primarily. And we kind of kicked everything off with the winning of an X Prize style global token and smart contract protocol contest put on by CoinGeek and nChain. So the prize was a £5 million prize, and that was really about an open source protocol that we maintain. So this is like the underpinnings of our platform. And it's sort of a domain specific language, if you will, for financial contracts, smart contracts, and the like. This is really central to what we're doing. And it is open source, and one day we hope to be called a boring ISO standard, so sort of the underpinnings of finance generally. So myself, I'm a trained electrical engineer, worked in the oil and gas industry for a number of years before doing this, but why I got into this was I always had a strong interest in economics, philosophy, these types of disciplines, and I was primed on the idea of cyber cash when I was about 15 years old from reading some books. So I thought a lot about the idea, the implications, and it really excited me. And so when I came across Bitcoin many years later, it instantly clicked for me. This is that cyber cash. And then we basically figured out society. So I was attracted to it, the nexus of all my interests, technical, etc. So passion from the get-go. And so yeah, tokens are overhyped. Bold words for the CEO of a company called Tokenized. I appreciate that. However, I think it's really important to drill down into what the value proposition is, right? What is the business value? How are people going to benefit from this? Why is this going to persist into the future? Because that's how these things work. People have to be motivated to use it. And I think most tokens and most of what is ascribed to tokens today is just not correct. I think it's caught up in mania, in misnomers, in misunderstandings, and poorly conceived concepts. Yes, it's an improvement. Yes, it represents a revolution in how ownership records are maintained. However, I think the big value proposition really is in smart contracts, where tokens are merely a subset of the contract, a tool to basically denote who owns what. So this is where the big value proposition is, and where the complexity is as well. So smart contracts. Smart contracts, what are they? Well, they're really a digital transformation of contracts, so legal agreements, the clauses, and the like. There's a codification element, so you're structuring and standardizing around certain concepts like types of shares, preferred shares, voting rights, interest rates, different interest rate schedules, penalty rates. There's a lot of concepts, voting rights, pro rata rights, the like. All these can be structured and codified, so they're much easier to understand. They standardize across the industry, and it gets to quicker contracting, less risk in contracting, easier and more novel insights that weren't possible before. And there's a lot of downstream stuff that becomes possible as well, which I'll get into in a few minutes. And the target market is really private markets. So you think about the public markets today, it's been digitized for a long time, or dematerialized is the term they use. There's a lot of automation already. There's a lot of software tools, a lot of automated trading tools, bots, the like. However, the private markets are still antiquated. And I actually see this frontier as being one of the last great frontiers in business record keeping in terms of digital transformation. And one of the hardest too, actually. So let's drill down on the problem. Let's get really specific. So contracting in private markets is poorly digitized. So you can imagine all the tools you use today and where the data is stored and how that data is replicated over and over again. So multiple data silos, both your own records, your lawyers, your counterparties' records, many, many data silos, and then many software solutions that have their own data silos as well. So a lot of manual handling, a lot of shuffling, a lot of errors, a lot of emails, a lot of redundancy. These inefficiencies ultimately hinder capital formation, asset services, and secondary market liquidity. So just turning something into a token or tokenizing something does not give it liquidity in the secondary market by itself. That's a key point, right? But when you bring everything together, you can start to improve liquidity for these types of instruments. So our solution, it's not a smart contracts platform, it's a smart contracting platform that uses smart contracts, among other things. And it uses BSV as the base layer for all record keeping. So the records of consequence, every part of it, including the contract details itself, all the terms and conditions, the instruments, the transfers, governance, administration, across the life cycle, amendments to the contract, all of that is handled and stored to the Bitcoin ledger. So there's a timestamping function for every single record of consequence, along with signatures and keys. Really, really critical as a foundational piece. And when you think about what that means for data of this type, commercial data, you get no political risk at the data layer, you get no jurisdictional risk, you get no organizational risk, right? And that's the heart and the beauty of the Bitcoin proof of work system. There's also efficiencies that come with economies of scale. So if you have a clearing and settlement network where you've got a single company and it is a niche set of instruments for a few jurisdictions or even quite large jurisdictions, and you compare it to a proof of work system that can do everything, you're looking at the beginnings of the global clearing and settlement network, where every single transaction, every type of instrument is done on a single platform, and the efficiencies of the design of proof of work in Bitcoin is such that it's incredibly, incredibly effective to deliver on this technical service. And then you get incredible efficiencies and economies of scale that come into play. So on a per transaction basis, the prices just fall through the roof, and then will continue to. And the value proposition in terms of redundancy, data persistence, data availability is all next generation, beyond what we can really see today in today's markets. To kind of give you a little bit more specifics around what this means in terms of the user experience, in terms of the value proposition, you look at all these tools. This is common. This is common from the very simplest use cases: someone investing in a startup, a sophisticated fund, private equity, banks, even all the way up to central banks, government agencies, and the like. When you really drill down to the kind of tools they use, it really comes down to basically Word for the agreements, Excel spreadsheets for registers, corporate registers, cap tables, the like, DocuSign for collecting signatures if they're a little bit more advanced in their leaning to tech, Adobe to kind of manage the finished versions and versioning control. And you get your cloud services that are all segregated and people have different versions, but that's where all these sources of truth are managed. And then you have software solutions like Carta, who do a great job, and I love the company, and they do what they can in the paradigm that they're in. But in this new paradigm, you can take it even further. So rather than pulling these key details out of contracts and manually keeping those details in sync with Carta and Carta's tools, where it can be automated there, you can actually connect it to banking systems and payments and subscriptions and interest payments and exercising of actual options and the like, where you can get a fully automated experience. So it's a big step forward, really big step forward. And so that's what our platform does. It takes all those tools as it pertains to contracts and all the associated functions and life cycle and reporting, pulls it all together and delivers what we believe a 10x solution, a real step forward. So quickly, we'll do some definitions, as I'm really anal about this kind of thing, but I think it's important. So tokens, what are tokens? A lot of people think tokens are JPEG, a picture, art, etc. Well, I'd argue that's not the case at all. I'd argue that a JPEG is a JPEG. There's a name for it already. Art, there's already a name for it. But what tokens are is really a pointer to something else, right? So you're looking at a digital or physical object that entitles the holder to some rights, duties, and or obligations which are specified in the contract and fulfilled by the issuing entity. So I think it's a universal definition for tokens. And I think it works for everything when you really drill down and think about it properly. Key things here, specified in the contract, right? So if you have a token and it's super decentralized and no one can take it from you, and all the things that people ascribe to distributed ledger, Dave's arguments notwithstanding, the contract is where all the details are. So if you don't have a contract, you don't have any rights associated with it, well, who cares what the token is, right? It's the rights and duties that you get with that token that are valuable and why you care about having them. And those are ultimately fulfilled by the issuing entity. So the issuing entity is a company, a trust, a partnership. It's a single thing that's registered in a single jurisdiction that's managed by people. So that's what gives the token value. So it's important to recognize the realities of it and who the actual people involved are and how to maximize value for those parties. And a smart contract is not what Ethereum is or what Ethereum calls a contract. And even Vitalik himself publicly declared that it was a massive mistake to call what they did contracts, and they basically have carried on even though it's a terrible idea. For us, smart contracts is everything that's necessary for a contract to be lawful. So all the details, legal prose, both human readable as well as machine readable. But the machine readable components that are blended into it is what makes it smart. This is where software can do things automatically, it can read it and parse it and interpret it. So this is really critical. Okay, so what can tokens represent and what does our protocol and platform handle? So basically all legal and financial instruments can be represented by token and they can benefit from doing so. And the issuers can be as high as like central banks, that type of thing, with massive volume, massive transactional throughput, ultra performant requirements. So making payments, micropayments, all that kind of stuff. Even hand cash is a use case where they're really pushing the envelope. Our protocol can do, and they can do very, very efficiently and competitively and very low cost. You can tokenize bank accounts. So you can look at this being the next generation of how bank accounts are managed, demand deposits, term deposits. Being able to have those term deposits and these tokens interact with CBDCs, stablecoins, all these other instruments. So that's the key part, is all these are interactive and composable, right? So very, very important, and that opens up big, big opportunities. Then you're looking at all your traditional financial instruments as well as new novel ones that come out. They're still legally similar, but in terms of what they do, there's some opportunities that sort of all this unlocks, which I can talk about a little bit further. But anyways, like exotic instruments, hybrid derivative options, anything like that can all be done, swaps. Importantly, when you get a token, it's not just a token. It comes with metadata as part of the protocol that allows people to understand what that token is in terms of what the legal instrument is. Is it a share? Is it a preferred share? Is it a type of debt instrument, fixed income, things like that? You can actually label it so that you can understand what you have. And again, software can make sense of it. And then you're moving more into the utility type tokens. So this is where NFT type use cases that people commonly get excited about, you can't do them correctly. You can't do them with a real legal basis, with real business value and real rights attached to it. And so these are some of the common ones that you can do. So carbon credits, copyright transfers, IP licenses, domain names, qualifications, license, all these can be done with a smart contract, and it's part of our protocol. So here's a quick snapshot of, this is not exactly what our app looks like now. This is a little further ahead than where we're actually built, but this is kind of where we're going. And I think there's some key concepts I really want to highlight and show how it's all going to look. So if you contrast this with a bank account and you go look at your credits and debits, there's not a lot of information there, right? You really have to look at memos and you have to correlate it with other records in a manual process to really make sense of what's happened. When did you get paid that interest payment? Was it the right amount? Does it line up with the contract details? You can see here we start to structure and codify events, different types of payments that interact with contracts so that contracts can recognize them and respond to them and force them automatically. You can see here they got, those are atomic swaps. So they're trading digital instruments, tokens for other instruments in a peer-to-peer manner. And it does so, it's sort of the next evolution of delivery versus payment, if you're familiar with that term in the securities industry. So you're getting one instrument for another. It happens atomically, goes in both directions, and either happens or doesn't. So there's no one that's left with any credit risk or liquidity risk. That can also be, as Brendan alluded to, you can do really, really complex atomic swaps with many, many counterparties, many, many instruments, and there's some really important use cases that unlocks. You can see here too, issuing LP interest. So again, these are tokens on chain. So this is, real ownership records, shareholder cap tables, all that is done with a single source of truth, and everything is derived from it. Distributing cash, so 48 recipients, we can push that to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions. So you can start to push the boundaries of what's possible in the private markets. A lot of countries cap how many shareholders you can have in a private company, 50, those kind of numbers. We think we can start to challenge that, and it becomes unwieldy to do much more than 50 in today's world. But where you have this kind of automation and these kind of insights, it becomes much, much more effective and easily done. I'll just quickly go in here and I'll go into the demo. So this is what a smart contract looks like. So this is really about lawyers and executives, non-technical people reading legal concepts that they recognize, business concepts, understanding it, and having all the components needed. So up there you can see for this debt security, there's some codified terms, interest payments, maturity date, and the like. It gets much more complex from there, but that complexity means simplicity for the users. So it's a really, really big step forward. This is a quick sort of UI example of an atomic swap. So this is direct peer-to-peer. So if you guys decide to make a deal in a conference like this, you can do it on your laptops, and you can just swap instruments right then and there, all settled on the blockchain. So no more Bernie Madoffs. So this is unique about Bitcoin at scale. When you have all the commercial records on, it means that every commercial record is linked to the other counterparties in a way that you cannot have multiple sets of books. And multiple sets of books is where a lot of the fraud globally comes from. Showing one investor one thing, a different investor this thing, the regulator another thing. Bernie Madoff, I think, was it 20 years he kept this whole party going. So this means instantaneously anyone can verify independently with 100% assurance that what they're investing in is as they say it is in terms of quantity, in terms of investment product, in terms of the people involved. Really, really important. So novel and real-time insight. So again, you think about when is your coupon payment due? Has it been paid already? You have to email your lawyer, you have to check your bank records, it's a manual process to find it out. Something's gonna take a week or so. We're talking instantaneous real-time at all times, 24/7. And ultimately, a simpler, faster, and lower cost experience, right? So this is what software is all about. We're really driving this home. This is a better experience that opens up new opportunities, and especially around when you start to push the scale. So smaller funds in terms of the amount in there where it becomes effective, in terms of OpEx and what have you, and even going from more to visibility, using micropayments to be able to do smaller distributions more frequently and the like. And here's a quick demo. So on the left here, you can see all the entities. So you have your companies, your partnerships, trusts, etc. So this is really, as a user, logging into your entire commercial life. Going through the activity list, all the events. So it's not just payments, it's contracts being executed, amended, resolutions being passed. This is your treasury, so these are your tokenized instruments, transaction history. So all these would be, we're still in the background. This is production, but in our developer and stuff, we got other instruments like financial instruments and the like. Cool, there you go. Thanks guys.